Well, you're
Yeah.
looking very well.
Oh, thank you.
That's
Because
not a
he's
tan. That's
getting
not a
some
tan-
sunshine. Secret.
Yeah, I feel a
tanning
bit guilty.
solution.
Yeah. Have you snuck away somewhere?
I have. Yeah, I'm in Australia.
Oh, right. Oh, so what? Oh,
Yeah.
so
It's only
late.
early evening.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. So,
but I'm used to sort of working through the evening. So
okay,
we
yeah.
started recording now, or
Yeah,
no? Because it's very conversational. You just
Yeah,
start it when you want.
This is the banter portion.
Yeah, we
Right.
just kind of roll straight into it. Really, it's
Right. Okay.
I think
I'll be careful what I'm saying right up then.
I think people are a bit, where you have the podcast or the podcast where I'm so pleased to have Christian Faes of Lendinvest. Christian comes to us, that kind of whole, oh God, just get on with it.
That's what I was expecting.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I can do that if you want me to.
Let's test it. Do some A/B testing.
Yeah, let's
Go for
test
it,
your
Chris.
knowledge. Yeah.
Well,
No, don't.
No, we just like to have a chat, like a pub chat. But maybe
Yeah.
that should be, instead of podcast, we should call it a pubcast or something. Because
Well,
obviously
when they
we're dreaming
reopen,
of being in the pub
Need to send me a
again.
beer to drink.
when they reopen, maybe that's where we could start live casting them from.
It could be dangerous. But there you go.
Have you followed the whole Clubhouse craze?
Oh, yeah. Well, what do you think of that?
I think it's quite interesting, just on that conversational point. Like, a lot of the chats I drop into only for a few minutes, and I just think, oh, this is nonsense. But actually, there have been some really good ones, and I kind of like the really casual nature to a lot of it. I mean, I guess you don't often get to hear casual chats with Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or some of the sort of high-profile people that have been on there. But actually, there's a lot of intelligent discussion just going on throughout the day. There's a lot of nonsense going on as well, but
it's a balance, isn't it? I think they just that classic
Bitcoin hitting $3 trillion or whatever channel sort of going 24/7 gets a bit boring.
Yeah, and yeah, it's kind of like you've got on the one hand Mark Zuckerberg speaking really intelligently about everything he's ever done, and then on the other hand you've got some nut job who's trying to ask him a question, and really it's an interesting mix, isn't it, really, that I just think they've probably got to get to that point where they have to start not really maintaining it with some kind of regulation, but it's got to find it's trying to find its middle point, I think, where you can have that intelligent audience and that intelligent sort of panel, and they kind of mix greatness. But I like you, Christian, I've been on a few of them, and I just kind of like I sort of stick around for a minute, and then I'm like,
better things to
do. I know.
I'm still waiting. What they really need to do is come out with an Android app so that the other 50% of the market can participate, because I've still not been on it.
Who's on Android? No, I have actually shared it with a few people, and they're like, "Oh, I'm on Android." It's like, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
No,
I'm on OnePlus.
Yeah, actually, I was on one the other day, and Bill Gates was in a Clubhouse chat, and he was saying he's on Android, but someone had given him an iPhone to do the chat.
Oh wow!
Apple.
I wish somebody would send me an iPhone just so I could get on.
I'm sure he's got many.
Maybe if you become famous through this pubcast, you might be people might be throwing things at you, Anthony. You never know.
It'd be good.
So you're whereabouts in Oz are you, Christian?
In Queensland.
Oh, nice. So obviously beautiful weather at the moment, I imagine.
Yeah, it's beautiful weather. I mean, it was a family sort of issue that brought me here originally just before Christmas, and then London was going into lockdown, so stayed. But it's I mean, the process to get here was just surreal. Like, as an Australian passport holder, it's very difficult. So it's kind of like, well, I'll stay for a little bit. But I'm actually looking forward to getting back to London. But my memory of it, even having been away for only a couple of months, is different to reality right now. So I miss the old life. So
are the family there with you, or you left?
Yeah, family's here.
Yeah,
no, family's here. So I did hotel quarantine with 2 young kids, myself, locked in a hotel room with under police guard.
2 weeks.
2 weeks, 14 days.
Oh,
Let
wow.
outside for like 10 minutes a day in a little concrete pen, like you're, you know.
You must
criminal.
have watched every piece of media content under the sun then.
Well, I would have, but I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old in the room with me, so I watched every bit of Disney I could.
Peppa Pig.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Dougie.
We bonded.
Yes, you know every single word of every single episode, which I actually remember when in my days of Peppa Pig. You know, it's quite funny because there aren't that many episodes made, and they just repeat them and repeat them and repeat them.
Yeah, they're quite short as well.
Yeah, then the kids think it's a new one every time, whereas you're like, oh, I know what happens next to
reruns.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so look on and how's well, I suppose digging into the beautiful Lendinvest. I was sort of racking my brains on when we first met, and I think it was 2015.
Yeah, it would have been, may even been a bit earlier. I'm not sure.
You had, I think, maybe an investment from the Chinese.
Oh yes,
it was a Chinese investment, I think, which
like to try and forget about.
Yeah, which I won't go on about. I mean,
no,
but I think, well, maybe it was before that. But anyhow, I always remember you came in. We did a great session in Bloomberg.
You did. Yeah, it was a breakfast or something you put on, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was just rammed full of people. I got the room completely wrong, and we should have been in the auditorium because we were trying to squeeze about 80 people into a room of 20. But it was great, and I think that was my first experience of Lendinvest and meeting you and hearing the story. And yeah, I mean, I don't know, for the audience who perhaps aren't so up to date on, the great story that is Lendinvest. I just wondered if you could start off by giving us a canned version of how it all came about, the key highlights, and I know we've only got an hour.
No, I can give you a very canned
we need the superhero origin story.
No, I mean, there's no sort of fable beginnings. I mean, it's we set up just as an offline mortgage lending business in 2008. I had returned back to London from Australia, set up the business, and in sort of getting some traction, we were very interested in technology, and I guess sort of started as an offline business, but then very much sort of started building technology and became a fintech, I guess, after having established the business. But if we fast forward to now, we're a fintech business. We are a technology-driven mortgage lender. We've raised over £2 billion of debt and equity. On the equity side, we've got investment from VCs like Atomico, the European Investment Fund, Tiger out of the US, and then on the debt side, I mean, debt kind of all capital, lending capital is the lifeblood of our business. We've got funding from not all the big names, but a lot of the big names like Citibank, HSBC, most recently JP Morgan, National Australia Bank, and so on. So I guess the business started from humble beginnings and sort of where it's been driven to now is much bigger, I guess, and still, our ambition is to be the biggest mortgage lender in the UK, which I know some people sort of roll their eyes and laugh at, but I think we have to be about 20 times bigger than what we are now to achieve that. But we're 20 times bigger than what we were, only X number of years ago. So
it's quite interesting that it really started off with getting the commercials right and the commercials going, and then you build the tech solution around that. We sometimes find that people do it the opposite way, and they spend all the seed capital on building up some great tech that then still is searching around for a problem, or there's no market for it. Was that purposeful or just kind of happened by accident?
Not really. I mean, I think it just happened. I mean, it's a really good point. I mean, for some businesses that works well. I think for us, we kind of, we set up in 2008 as a mortgage lender, which was kind of like the worst timing you can imagine. I've sort of arrived back
counter-cyclical.
I'm going to build a mortgage lending business. So we, talking to VCs or raising equity capital was just kind of like, my co-founder and I laugh. I mean, we didn't spend more than 5 seconds even thinking about that. Like, that just wasn't really a thing. So we just sort of started building a business, and I guess you focus on the commercials and trying to sort of have enough fall to the bottom line to pay for some rent for your shitty Regis desk, and keep the lights on, and eventually get some employees and sort of build it that way. And you're right. I mean, I do a bit of angel investing myself, and you often meet founders and they're kind of like, well, I'm going to disrupt the insurance market, or a lot of founders want to disrupt mortgages, and they come from backgrounds maybe tangentially in mortgages or whatever, but it's kind of like, wow, that's going to be really hard. And you're going to need a lot of money, and you're probably going to end up not owning much. Unfortunately, like for my co-founder, we didn't raise any capital for 7 years. So we bootstrapped it for that long. And so we now own over 75% of the business still today. So I think it's probably a slower route, definitely, but arguably a bigger pie to be held at the end of it.
So who was the first, I suppose, VC or external capital that kind of you decided to dance with at the so to speak?
Well, we first raised money, so we were quite bratty. We kind of by sort of 5-6 years in, I think we kind of thought we knew everything, and we're kind of quite anti-VC. And so we were approached by a Chinese investor that we had never heard of, and sort of had a brilliant track record in China and so on. And we ended up taking investment from that investor. We were able to buy them out of the business, which was mutually amicable. And then actually just before we bought them out, we received investment from Atomico, and I think by that stage we kind of were maybe starting to realize we didn't know everything, and maybe a VC could help. And actually, they have been hugely helpful, and I think you don't know what you don't know, but trying to institutionalize a business and really scale it, it's hard. And I think they were very helpful in terms of getting the right people into the business, having a proper corporate structure, getting some really experienced people in. Because again, when you're hiring people, you don't even know what a good CFO looks like, or a good, CTO or whatever, because you just, haven't ran a business before of that size. So I think, a good VC can add a lot of value, and certainly they did. So that was just the Chinese were 2015, and then 2016 was Atomico.
So on the mismatch with that first investor, was it, and go into as much or as little detail as you want on this, but was it just like sort of a strategy, or like a strategy mismatch, or it was some other aspect that kind of ended up not working out, which meant you had to part ways?
Yeah, I think in some respects, it like I say, it was amicable. I think particular investor was keen to sort of invest in fintech in Europe, and then over time was probably less excited about that, particularly compared to at that time what was going on in China, where businesses were quadrupling every quarter, and I think there was a bit of like, Lendinvest, like, what the hell, you guys are only growing at 100% per annum, like this is like just so uninteresting.
So it's kind of a time horizon and opportunity cost kind of thing for the investor.
Yeah, and it wasn't as explicit as that. It was kind of, but it was, that's kind of the vibe that we were getting, and so we were able to part ways and sort of move on.
And I suppose with that, Christian, the founders that are listening, you've built a superbly successful business. That has not come without challenges. So I'm curious if there are some kind of key bits of advice that you can offer people. I thought it was really interesting what you just said about you didn't take money for 7 years. Just if you can offer any wisdom here, that would be really appreciated.
Yeah. Wisdom, I don't know. I think like as a lending business, well, I think founders just should appreciate, and you guys know this, it's just hard, this is the reality. And I think the entrepreneurial journey is sometimes a bit glamorized with, Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, where, people raise money off the back of a 5-minute pitch, and, TechCrunch, like everyone's raising more and more money at crazy and crazier valuations, and it's kind of
they only report the good news.
Exactly.
The press that
and there's kind of this cheerleading that I think misleads people as to what that journey is most likely going to be like. Like most of them, most businesses will fail, and most founders will probably be able to earn more money if they just kept their jobs and stayed doing what they're doing. But like there is a big prize there if you can stick it out and you have a lot of luck and you get things right. But I don't think that story is told enough. I think it's starting to probably be a bit, it's people sort of starting to realize that a bit more now. But I do find it funny when I turn on TV and there's kind of this glamorization of the journey, because there's no overnight successes. Even I look at Facebook, like it took them 10 years to list, and that's probably the craziest, fastest journey ever. Every overnight success is built on a decade or more of hard work before it. So I think that's just an important thing for founders to think about, and not be put off by some of those headlines, because I know sometimes when you're building a business, you can be very insecure around whether you're successful enough or whether you're sort of achieving the goals you want to achieve. And like I say, you go to TechCrunch, it's like, oh, these guys are raising more and more money, and it's kind of like, what am I doing wrong? I think don't believe that, because most of that's bullshit anyway.
Well, even on that,
I think sometimes it's somewhat misleading as well, because with the businesses we work with and advise from pre-seed to Series A, there are cases where when perhaps there's a fund involved in a particular investor relations campaign that we're running, and we always advise the founder that, look, you have to, you're going to be married to this person for 7 or so years. You've got to really like them. They're literally going to be like your partner, and also that, as well as what's all, look at the fine print. What are in those, what's in the terms, how's this all structured? Because obviously, like you're saying, Christian, the headlines and the XYZ invests in whoever, what's underneath that? Is it and it's kind of interesting that no one really, I suppose we're specialists or experts, and we really dig into that and help this, whereas it all seems to be a bit glossed over when you look at it.
It's very superficial, a lot of the sort of coverage of the sector, and like you say, with preference stacks and all this kind of stuff, often actually to the disadvantage of the founders at the end of the day, or certainly the staff that work in these businesses. They all think the business is worth X gazillion, and actually they realize that the investor that's just come in's got a 10-time liquidation pref or something crazy, which actually means they haven't paid anything near that valuation. So I think you've got to just try and sort of not get too caught up in that, and just come back to the, the principles around what are you trying to achieve as a business. You're making short-term decisions, but kind of for the medium, long term of the business, and picking the right investor is, like you say, I mean, it is a marriage, and statistically probably have the same sort of success rate, not necessarily always great. And
this is those not listening at the moment.
I mean, we had a good divorce, I guess. But I think that you've got to make sure the investors in it for the long haul as well, and that they're on the same page. And I know many founders that have had really bad experiences with investors. They kind of got courted into maybe a high valuation, or sort of a perception around an investor that post investment sort of the changes, or they find they haven't really got their back. So I think you've got to reference your investors, which I know that sounds like common sense, but I know even we haven't done that perhaps as much as we could have in the past. And I think you need to think about it. You're going to be doing this for a long time if it's going to be successful.
I mean, even on
make
that,
sure you've got the right people.
Even on that Facebook reference, right? Of it took them 10 years to IPO. If you then put that into the context of the Facebook story, the IPO was just the midpoint, really, right? If you look at where they've taken it since then, even. So it is definitely a long haul. And the exit, isn't always the exit, isn't always the end of the story, I should say.
Yeah, I know. I mean, like, it's an initial public offering, right? It's just like the birthing of the business.
Yeah.
It's not it's not the end. And certainly, as a founder, I mean, excuse me, you can't sell it all day one anyway. So like you're going to be in it for a long time.
Yeah, that's just a 10-year prelude.
Yeah, that's just when you can get a realistic number on what it might be worth.
So would you say on the Lendinvest story, Christian, you feel like where are you? Are you a third of the way through? Are you half? Are you what the sort of is it I know we've talked about the sort of public company stuff in the past, and I'm not asking you to give a definitive answer on that, but just where do you think you are on your story?
I think certainly as far as the business is concerned, it's just the early days. I mean, we do aspire to be a listed business. I think that will be a good stepping stone to providing transparencies to the market and some liquidity for investors and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think that's when we get to that, maybe you're sort of getting to a third way in the journey. But also, I think once you're listed, I think you're also probably going to be a permanent business, and that's how I often think about it. Once you're listed, you're going to be around for probably decades, or hopefully even longer than you're around. I think we're just getting started in that journey, and like it's 12, 13 years in. It's kind of off to a good start.
And how if you were to give people just a bit of a frame on the actual how many people are in the business, business locations. Obviously you've got HQ in Queensland at the moment.
It's not
the moving HQ.
Yeah, no. So we're based in London. We have about 200 employees. That's gyrated around a little bit through the sort of pandemic. I think we went into it with about 230, dropped to maybe about 180, or I'm not sure, maybe not quite for that, but then sort of started hiring again throughout it. Based in Mortimer Street in Fitzrovia in London. Beautiful offices. Chris, you've been up there, that are now empty, which is kind of, it's a sad thought. But we made the transition to remote working exceptionally well. And actually it's kind of like, it's a shock like that where the investment in technology has really paid off. And certainly when I was CEO, I've stepped to the exec chair role now, but when I was CEO, I was dead against remote working. Like anyone that was working from home, I just thought was like working from the couch from their phone, or just like at the movies or something. Like I just had the worst perception of it. But I guess now, like, you can't go to the movies, or you can't be sort of, maybe you can be working from the couch, but there's nothing to do. Maybe that's why it's working. But like everyone works from a laptop, like just basic stuff. All of our, technology infrastructure is cloud-based. And in the mortgage industry, like a lot of our competitors, when COVID happened, they were scrambling to buy laptops. They had physical server-based systems where they had to get floppy disks and USB, like just the most backwards setup.
So did you guys invest in any like productivity monitoring tools because of your perception of remote working, or you just learned to roll with it?
We have, and we were before, because I think whilst I was dead against it, our chief people officer, she's sort of a big proponent of it. She comes from businesses that have been, working successfully remote in the past. And I think it kind of fit our culture as a business for us to be more open to remote working than certainly what I was. So a lot of my push was, well, how do I know they're not, working from the couch? And if they are working from the couch, then what are they getting done and stuff? So I think with certain teams in the business, it works easier than others. So I think like engineers, engineering can actually be set up to work remotely great. You can see how many lines of code each engineer deploys, how much of it is redundant within a certain period of time, and so on. Like you can get pretty granular view on who's doing what in those teams. Then, like the marketing team or the legal team, or sort of, teams that operate in a different way, that's harder. But then it's kind of a level of trust, isn't it? I mean, kind of, people are all at home, so maybe not working the whole time, but.
How is that shape of the business now, Christian? Is it sort of 50, 60% engineers, 20% sales? How's it look?
Yeah, no, it's not. So it's about a third of our headcount is product and engineering.
Okay.
And then it's kind of, then there is sort of a very human element to the sales side. So it's business development guys who are based in London, but also, you know, remote across the country. And then there's kind of central functions like finance, accounting, legal, compliance now, of course, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, but engineering's about a third.
Okay, and then you clearly mentioned the lovely office at Mortimer Street, which I'm sure you and your colleagues are looking forward to returning to at some point. I'm just curious, what's your thought set on that?
I think it's too early to tell. I mean, just before the pandemic broke out, we were looking for additional office space, so we were going to take another floor in the building, and thank God we didn't. You know, and I think we can certainly fit in the space that we've got. And actually sort of mid last year, we said to everyone we weren't going to call people back till September this year. So we wanted to give people almost sort of like 18 months of clear room that if you want to move out of London or sort of get a more affordable accommodation situation or go back with family or whatever, this is a great time to do it. And the business was working quite successfully remotely, so we fully embraced it. Over time, yeah, like I say, it's too early. I do feel for like the younger crew, you know, like if you're sort of mid-20s, single, I know from my, you know, the work environment is part of your social life, particularly in a, you know, a great city like London where there's so much to do. And also just that you can learn so much. Like, you know, again, you know, as a youngster, I used to be a lawyer, and you just learn so much from being around your bosses or your partners or, you know, whatever. Just by osmosis, you're sitting in a meeting with them. Yeah, you can sit in a Zoom call, but it's the chat around the coffee, you know, machine after the meeting and what they think of this person and what's really happening here and what the strategy is and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's kind of missed a bit. I guess we'll see how we go. Our current thinking is we will sort of go back to the office, but we probably will have a far more flexible working arrangement where people sort of encouraged to be in the office maybe 2 or 3 days a week. But actually, from the hiring we've done since the start of the crisis, it's kind of outside of London now. So actually, I think our workforce will be more UK-wide, arguably more cost-effective in some parts, and actually international as well, you know, which is kind of the way. It's just a huge acceleration of all that stuff. So it's interesting.
Good. And then the exec chairman role. How you still, you know, hands on your baby, or you kind of up in a, well, in Queensland, smoking cigars, feet up, and like counting the dollars or the
surfing,
dollars,
working on my surfing. Nah, I mean, yeah, I'm still very hands on. I'm still, you know, full-time employed by the business. You know, the initial thinking around that was I'd been doing it for 12 years. Was feeling maybe not burnt out, but certainly burnt out from the day-to-day management. Like I don't feel that I'm naturally a great manager, whilst I can do it. We had someone in the business was an exceptional manager and kind of was, you know, co-founder, all but by name in some respects, Rod, who I think you know, Chris, as well. Yeah. And it just kind of felt like a natural evolution to let him come up, let the business see someone come through the business, let them see that, you know, it's not just two founders trying to sort of meddle and everything, even, you know, maybe when it's not their core strength. So that was a positive move. And then for me, still feeling that I had a lot of value to add. You know, it is my baby, but I think, you know, we've got great people in the business. I don't feel like I have to be there every day for its survival. Certainly, you know, like I felt like in previous years. So, you know, it's opportunity to think a bit more. So getting quite involved in the strategic side of the business, a lot of sort of government relations stuff, which was, you know, useful through the pandemic, and you know, PR, marketing, and actually a lot more engaged with our investors, like talking with our investors a lot more than what I would have in the past. So a more sort of measured role, I guess, for my skill set, and has allowed me to do other things. So I'm involved with this Fintech founders group, which I'm quite passionate about, trying to sort of, you know, have a voice for Fintech founders within within the ecosystem, and you know, get involved in some other stuff, which is kind of, you know, synergistic with Lendinvest, but it's kind of, I wouldn't have had time to do that in the past as I am now.
So with Fintech founders, and I think I may have been to one of your dinners in the past, or if that was Fintech founders, but there's some great people around, you know, all the guys on Fido, Revolut, so we're all around the table, which was brilliant. But I suppose quite topical at the moment. Have you ever discussed at one of those forums changing your name? Because clearly recently we had quite a lot of kerfuffle and a lot of press and social media sort of commentary on TransferWise and how they decided.
Don't you mean just wise?
Would you ever do something like that with Lendinvest, or
just,
you know,
turn it into just lend?
I'm joking around a bit here, but
We just lend.
Change.
No, I mean, yeah, I mean, I can understand why TransferWise did that. I mean, that is an absolute monster of a rocket ship business that they've built there, and I guess it's moved beyond just doing money transfers. It looks like their ambition now is to kind of take over the world, and you know, good on them. I think it's a great success story for fintech and for UK fintech, whilst they're very much a global business now. Changing their name, I mean, yeah, I probably wouldn't have done it, but I'm sure they've got some marketing people that were paid a huge amount of money to come up with that and a rationale as to why it was sensible. It's probably a good time for them to do it now before I assume they're going to be listed in the not too distant future and probably take on an even greater profile. For us at Lendinvest, I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but I just kind of think you pick a name and go for it and just stick with it. It's kind of, people get used to it, but people get used to the new name as well. I remember like Monzo, was it Mondo before? And I remember they changed it, thinking, oh, Monzo, that sounds so bad. And now I think Mondo sounds bad. So it's kind of.
So yet to be seen if it was a wise move. Hey.
Bang.
Probably will be.
So I suppose on sticking on the fintech theme, naturally you've been part of this whole, I suppose, wave of success that lots of people have heralded, you know, the UK as a home, because clearly, you know, a lot of the founders are, you know, have moved their businesses to the UK because of its financial, I suppose, London as a financial centre. Do you think that is you know, the fintech boom is we're still riding that crest of a wave? I mean, there have been a few, you know, stories where, you know, perhaps some of the fintechs haven't been run quite as well as they should have been. I'm just kind of curious, you know, the regulators are probably looking at business practices even with more scrutiny, because, you know, clearly I would say, you know, the tech in the fin is becoming more and more prominent. Just curious what your sort of overriding perspective is of you know, are we still going to see that ascendancy of fintech or governments or regulators, not just in the UK, I suppose, but across Europe and maybe, you know, I don't know what's happening in Oz at the moment, but just sort of what's the perspectives there?
So I think we're still very much in the early days of it all. And, you know, I think we get to a point probably in the not too distant future where fintech is really just financial services. You know, I couldn't imagine you starting a financial services business now without a website or having sort of technology as sort of a core part of your offering. So you're kind of like, you're a financial services business, but you could also be a fintech. If we go back to, you know, when we first met Chris, or, you know, it was kind of like right in the eye of the storm, it felt like, with the first wave of excitement around fintech. And a lot of that was focused on peer-to-peer lending and crowdfunding and the regulatory sandbox, and, you know, so a lot of government intervention and structures being set up, which were really good in terms of, you know, allowing the sector to get a foothold in the UK, which was kind of, I feel like London and the UK is a natural place for fintech to be a big sector. But, you know, then if we look at peer-to-peer 5 or 6 years later, it's kind of not that big a thing. And actually there's not that even funding circle, which I'd say is, you know, the biggest, most successful. They kind of, it's all institutional money, and rates that has been sold to a bank. And I mean, Zopa's become a bank. but and then then we kind of moved on to what was it, like the neobanks, and I think there was kind of like, again, huge excitement, and you couldn't pick up a newspaper without reading about the neobanks, and I don't know whether that model sort of survives as it is. There'll be winners, but I think there's probably maybe less excitement about it. I think you kind of get a bit of a convergence. So like the big financial services business are not asleep at the wheel. Barclays' investment in technology, whilst the vast majority will just be spraying money up against the wall, they're not asleep to the opportunity. And then at the same time, you've got fintechs that are coming with a blank sheet of paper, but probably less money and resources and capital really than some of the big players that are going to protect their turf. I think the banking lobby is pretty powerful in the UK as well. So, they're not going away anytime soon. I do think we're just getting started. I think, potentially businesses like TransferWise, Revolut, Lendinvest, I think, they're businesses that could become very big financial institutions, although you probably don't want to be described that way in the future, but, big, meaningful businesses. So I'd be going long on fintech. And I also think like the colourful review, which has just come out, the Treasury's kind of mandated.
Short review, very short. 100 pages.
Yeah, I know. It's a good read.
What's your view on that, Chris? Oh, can you give me a couple of days to read it?
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting. There wasn't much immediate press around it.
Yeah, no, it was
people had to read it.
Yeah, it was a good review. I mean, yes. So, your seat at the Fintech Forum, Christian, obviously gives you I suppose a good oversight of what could be the next sort of wave of fintechs coming through the ecosystem. For any of the listeners that they may have, any particular names or any particular trend in the technology or the data sets that you're seeing coming through in the next wave of talent?
So I don't have any magic insights. I guess it's just a view, but what I'm quite excited about, I still am excited about lending businesses. I think they're massively undervalued. I think they're generally misunderstood by investors because they just don't understand lending really. It gets a bit hard looking at them. So I think they get misvalued, and they also have unique challenges around trying to get lending capital and so on, which I think are solutions that are kind of going to get easier over time. So I think lending business is kind of a missed opportunity by a lot of investors. And then I also think that the infrastructure businesses are quite interesting, or the financial infrastructure, I guess that's a grandiose way, the B2B type businesses like an Onfido, they kind of, they're not, most consumers don't really haven't heard of the name. They're not familiar with what it is, but actually provides a really useful service to anyone that needs to do KYC, AML stuff in a very easy way. And it's similar businesses like Credit Kudos, both of which I'm an investor in. So, talking my book, but, Credit Kudos is kind of trying to reassess the way we assess credit for people when we're lending to them by using open banking and different ways to look at things. So I think those sorts of businesses, again, they're probably the less sexy, but I think are probably the longer term most interesting, or those types of businesses. So, I mean, take it for what it's worth.
What about some of the blockchain based opportunities that are still out there, like DeFi, or interesting as well with all the SPAC stuff? I'm wondering if ICOs will come back in vogue, but perhaps in a much better, perhaps regulated, and in a way that allows people to actually, obviously, in NFTs with people.
So I do think that space is fascinating. Like, I feel like crypto is, what was it? 2017 was kind of the first massive hype around that, where like the whole world was talking about crypto. I think I kind of felt at that time the regulators are going to quash this, and it probably isn't going to be around in a year's time, or there was a high chance of that. That hasn't happened. And actually, even in the colourful review, they're talking about maybe there should be a regulatory framework around crypto in the UK. And that's a way to get ahead, the same as they did for peer-to-peer and crowdfunding and some of those areas. Bringing regulation actually perhaps helps the sector. I I think it's fascinating. I'm truly fascinated by crypto, but I also feel like I could probably spend all of my time looking at it and not necessarily understand all of the acronyms and coins.
There's a lot of aspects to it. Yeah.
Yeah, there is. Yeah. You've only got to go on Clubhouse for, 20 minutes to realize.
Send me an iPhone and I'm there.
So I suppose following on that point that Anthony made, SPACs, obviously I think the budget was yesterday, and there's some commentary there. It looks like the UK may be opening its doors more to the SPAC revolution. Just any gems there, Christian? You kind of think that's a good thing, or
I don't. Yeah. So Lord Hill did his review on the listings in the UK, and it looks like there's some really interesting recommendations in that, and the Chancellor sort of picked it up in the budget, from what I can see. So the SPAC craze, it feels like a bit of a craze in the US. Like, I think they're on track to list 1,000 SPACs in the US this year, and they've got to go then find 1,000 businesses worth buying. So there's just a huge amount of liquidity in the market, clearly low interest rates, and all the stimulus that's been pumped into the system is finding its way into things like SPACs and Bitcoin and other things. But I think what they seem to be talking about potentially doing in the UK is sensible, because the issue, I mean, we've been approached by SPACs at Lendinvest, like US SPACs. They've gone and raised money and they say, hey, would you interested in a discussion around us buying you? And it's like, we're going to be listed in the US. We're a UK business. I mean, it's logical for us to be listed in the UK, but hey, maybe so you start having those discussions and entertaining stuff. And I think the UK is at risk of losing good businesses to US listed SPACs. So I think they've kind of almost got to do it from a competitive perspective to try and get
all
UK
the
listed
Soonicorns. All the Soonicorns about to list an IPO just get snapped up by SPACs at the last minute.
Exactly.
It's a huge risk.
I mean, if you're IPO ready, I mean, they come and they say, well, we've got the cash, and I mean, it's dilutive, and there's sort of some of the terms look a bit like it's opaque, and you don't really you
give you a great valuation,
20% of the business,
access to loads of liquidity, right? Biggest liquidity market in the world, right? And it can happen overnight.
It's a done deal. You don't have to go through the 6 months of road showing and prospectus drafting and all that sort of stuff. So
efficient, very efficient. The investment banks probably love and hate them, I suppose, because they live on that whole IPO roadshow type, advice, and they just.
But I guess they're doing lots of SPACs now. Yeah. The banks will do okay.
Yeah, they always do.
Don't worry about them.
Yeah, and then I suppose just looking a bit more on M&A, interested is to become bigger. Is M&A a feature for Lendinvest? And I'm kind of curious, have you actually acquired any sort of startups or other businesses so far in the journey?
Yeah, so we haven't done any M&A before, and in some respects, but we have looked at quite a number of opportunities, and there's a few that we're looking at now. Often one of the reasons why we don't sort of progress it is because we've never done M&A, and is this going to be a distraction? And you're importing a different culture into your business, different people, and certainly now when it's remote, like I don't know, you sort of importing a whole range of other issues. And do we need to do it? I think M&A is interesting. You definitely see. We have seen. I think we'll continue to see businesses will struggle. I'm not sure there's infinite VC money to throw at companies that don't have a business model yet, and so there'll be businesses that kind of were once parading at huge valuations that kind of do face saving deals to join another business and continue under a different banner, and that could be an opportunity for us, potentially. I mean, obviously wouldn't describe it that way, but I think we'll see a bit of that, and sometimes that's good if there's a talented team that are working on an idea that's a good one, and it allows them to continue their work, but. I guess we'll see. The other thing is there's just so much liquidity now that even maybe there is infinite VC money. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting time. I suppose we a couple more for me before we wrap. I'm really always very we've just gone through obviously one of the biggest strangest, or well, we're still going through the pandemic here, obviously in the UK, and really kind of unforeseen circumstances. And I'm just curious, if you have a fear for the year ahead, and which some of the founders and the VCs we've talked to like to give their sort of perspective on 2021, and what could be the banana skin, in the macro. Just curious, what would that be, Christian?
I mean, I'm no oracle on this stuff. I think that pre-COVID, there was, when we would talk to investors, there was a lot of talk about, oh, we're getting to the end of a cycle. It's risk off. We're not sort of looking to, we're going to see a big shock to the system. And you'd always be scratching your head going, I don't know where that shock's going to come from, because everything's great. Maybe Donald Trump doing something silly or whatever at the time. And then we get this virus and there's a huge shock to the system. But actually, most businesses are doing okay. Clearly, there's sectors that are going to be super challenged and have difficulty surviving. But, businesses like ours have done okay. A lot of the fintechs have done okay. The banks are doing fine. You kind of just scratch your head and wonder, was that the end of the cycle? Like, is this the beginning of the next cycle? And clearly it's low interest rates and endless stimulus. Like, there's kind of like an implicit guarantee from the government now that they will print money and put money into the system to make sure things don't come to an end. And I guess you just scratch your head and wonder how does that come to an end? They've just extended the furlough scheme and all this stuff in the budget yesterday. Eventually that has to be paid for or printed, or you can't, we're not a socialist society, so the government can't just endlessly give people money. So I wonder if, like, last year was not really the year of economic pain, but the economic pain's ahead, and maybe we're in a bit of a false sense of security around things. But I don't know. I mean, I'm an optimist as well, so you don't want to be too cautious as well in a time like this, potentially.
I was reading this great article on some obscure website, read almost like a manifesto, really. It was so long, I didn't finish it. But what they were really highlighting was the difference between the QE in 2008, which was just to recapitalize the banking system, and the QE plus fiscal stimulus that's happening now, which is finding its way into people's savings account. And it was kind of interesting to hear them say that people were expecting us to come to the end of the long-term debt cycle, which was causing all the deflationary pressure. And my question at the moment is, has this just extended the long-term debt cycle? Because it seems like they've just pushed off those deflationary pressures, right? There still isn't long-term inflation ahead, despite what people are going on about with the yield curve at the moment.
Yeah, who knows, right? It looks like maybe there is, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I feel it definitely has been pushed down the road, probably for right reasons. I mean, I remember, as you guys will, March, April last year, you'd sit on calls and there'd be people, banks and, smart people saying, we're not sure if there'll ever be a vaccine. Like, this could be, we haven't found one for AIDS, and, there are all these diseases, and kind of like, this is the new normal. It's like, oh, God. Wow. So it was pretty dark. So they had to print all this money, put all this stimulus in, and now but now they're still doing it.
Right, it's going to be our grandchildren or great grandchildren that I think feel that pain. I think, but look, on another love of mine, and you know this very well, because I've I think we have shared friends in Matt at Freelancer, and Mike at Atlassian, the Aussie tech scene. Aussies don't like it being called Aussie. Australia.
Oh, really? Oh, I don't care.
I've been held up by a few people over the years for that. When I was speaking at StartCon and things like that. Just curious. Obviously, I really miss heading down to Oz and Australia, and just has the tech scene continued to sort of grow in the last 12-18 months? I mean, I know you're kind of you're probably one step away from it because of the element, but just any anecdotes there?
I'm a bit removed. Like, I have done the rounds a few times down in Sydney and sort of caught up with people that I know, and it feels like the Australian or the Aussie tech scene is it's definitely growing, and some great success stories like Atlassian and Canva as create a huge amount of interest from new VC funds being set up and a lot of interest in the sector. So I think that's helpful. It's been interesting being back for a couple of months, but because I do feel increasingly that, and you know, some of this is tainted by, you know, what their view they've taken with the COVID situation, but it's quite a detached, small market. You know, the way they were just happy to shut down the country, close themselves to the rest of the world, and we'll be okay. Yeah, you probably will be okay, but like there's a big wide world out there, and I think any business that wants to be hugely successful, like an Atlassian or a Canva, you can't do that in a market as small and as insular as Australia alone. Where again, when I look conversely to the UK, I think I just always think of huge opportunity. I think it's a very entrepreneurial culture. I think there's, you know, a lot of government incentives around EIS and CDIS investment. All that kind of stuff is the base infrastructure for success around early stage and technology businesses. And you don't have that here. It's kind of always, you know, taxes going up, and it's a different culture to it here. So yeah, look, clearly there'll be big, interesting businesses built from Australia, but it doesn't seem obvious. I think like you, and I've recently listened to a great podcast with Mike Cannon-Brookes, not as good as our podcast or pubcast is right now, but you know, like they really struggled for a long time as well. You know, they struggled like way more than us, and their results way bigger. But you know, trying to build a big global tech business out of Australia was pretty hard for those guys, and so I think the challenges are just much harder than if you perhaps somewhere else was more capital, more risk appetite, more global view on things.
Yeah, and it's the whole kind of the mining, the resource companies dominate
exactly
markets, and
yeah. I mean, when I talk to
tech company there,
yeah, people about sort of climate change and that sort of stuff, there's still like a bit of eye rolling, like, oh, that's just nonsense. You know, like some of the views are pretty backward in Australia, actually. And you know, very, you know, interested in what they've recently done with like Facebook and Google. Like they're charging them for links, so they're making them pay the media companies for sending the media companies traffic. Like
that was really interesting to see.
Fucking ridiculous! It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. And
Facebook,
but everyone's
Facebook
like, that's
literally
great, sticking it to Facebook.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
And then Facebook literally tried to call their bluff, and then we're like, yeah, okay, fine.
Yeah,
that only lasted so long, didn't it?
But I bet you they'll get the last laugh out of it. I mean, look, these political parties win through Facebook ads and things like that. Like, I mean, it just sets out the stool as being anti-innovation, anti-technology, anti-progress. I just feel it's a real disappointment to see stuff like that.
It's now given the EU a case study, right? A real life case study. Because they have a similar
Who
sort
would you
of mantra,
expect to follow a stupid law and over-regulated industry? Like, of course, the EU. I mean, I love Europe, but like GDPR. Anyone?
Let's move on at this point, I think. But look, you know, I think it's been great catching up. One last thing that we tend to ask all of our guests is, you know, the downtime. Clearly, some people have had more of it than others in the last few months. This kind of, you know, Netflix, I think, was at the Grammys this week. There's some great shows showcase. Just anything you've been on Netflix, Amazon, streaming channels that you could recommend the audience?
I've just watched. It was on. I'm not sure what channel it is over here. It's called Your Honor, which is a great series with the guy from Breaking Bad. Brilliant.
Oh yes, it's just launched on Sky over.
Has it?
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah,
it's very good.
Brian from Breaking Bad.
Is it Cranston?
Brian Cranston, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Whenever I see him, I always imagine him go off to a kitchen and start cooking crystals, and it's kind of, I need to refocus. He's in a different show. I'm looking forward to that.
Good. And I'm sort of partway through reading a book which I'd highly recommend, although I haven't finished it, so probably a bit disingenuous. But it's called "They Tell Me This Is How the World Ends," which is about sort of systems getting, or cybersecurity risks, in globally, that are kind of largely overlooked in the black market in trading, 0 days, hacks and stuff. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, that does sound interesting.
The cyber warfare of the future, or which is actually going on now, but we don't sort of hear that much about in
Is it fiction or non-fiction?
No, it's a true, it's a sort of a documentary book.
Yeah.
What do you call it?
Anytime Dark Trace does some sort of speaking events, I'm always like glued to it. I'm like, whoa, dystopian.
Yeah, be right up their alley.
Yeah.
Right, and then a bit of surfing as well, I imagine.
Yeah, I've been doing. Yeah, I feel guilty saying it if it's any consolation, but yeah, I have been doing quite a lot of surfing the last little while, but
nice.
Because there's nothing else to do, and I work all the evening. I work all through the night.
You have to surf for the rest of us. You got to make up for it.
Yeah. I'll look for some photos on the feed, Christian.
I'm
not promoting that I'm here.
I have a few mates that live down in Oz, and they revel in posting the pictures of the spiders and the snakes. And, any sharks in the water at the moment?
Well, there are increasingly more sharks, which I'm quite petrified about. I was out recently, and there was a shark sort of time to get out of the water moment, which is it's pretty unnerving. But
just when you thought it was safe to go back in.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, Christian, it's been a pleasure. And
thanks for this.
We'll be publishing shortly, and just great. I love what you've achieved. You're a great guy, and keep up the great work. Okay, mate. And
thanks for the invite on this, and look forward to catching up in the real world very soon.
In the Ladbroke in Notting Hill at some point.
A proper beer. Yeah, that would be good.
First episode of the pubcast.
Yeah.
Ended.
Okay, good stuff.
See you later, guys.
See you guys.